Just sick. Ursula von der Leyen wants to roll out the most extreme wave of censorship the EU has ever seen. It said here that she wants to proactively tackle misinformation through pre-bunking before it spreads, by immunizing people kind of like a vaccine against a virus. So you all are supposed to get vaccinated now, against false information, against anyone spreading things that shouldn't see the light of day. That means we now have a ministry of truth here, a thought police like in 1984 in George Orwell's novel, which described very clearly that things are being massively censored here. And this censorship is not taking place somewhere in an African dictatorship or something like that, but right here in the EU. Ursula von der Leyen speaks openly about these plans here. These are not secret plans or anything like that, but she is now addressing this quite openly in a new speech that we absolutely have to watch. Because this has the highest stakes for Bitcoin, since there's one thing they really don't like here. Things that can't be controlled. And what is it that can't be controlled well at all, that can't be controlled or banned in any way? That's Bitcoin. And that's why they're really going hard against Bitcoin here. Ursula von der Leyen is really the leader here, up in her ivory tower in Brussels, rallying everyone and firing them up, especially those who still have any thoughts about freedom. They'll all get vaccinated. Then someone comes up with the idea of using Bitcoin, for example, as a reserve currency. Then they say, no, we're giving you the vaccine now. The vaccination isn't in the form of a shot or anything like that. It's in the form of censorship, where you just say that if someone shares something about Bitcoin, then you censor them. Or if someone shares something else that they don't like to see, then they get censored too. They get a vaccination here as well, they get a shot too. I mean, not a real shot, but a debunking. I don't know, an information dissemination shot where they just censor you. That is also the big warning from the USA against the EU. They say, okay, JD, Wen says, if the EU censors here, there will be massive consequences. But von der Leyen doesn't seem to care at all. She's just going all out and wants to censor even more. As already mentioned, this has massive implications for Bitcoin. I mean, that was just an example. They might be taking action against Bitcoin. They'll also go after other things. I don't know exactly what they'll be going after. We'll see about that. But listen in on this Ursula von der Leyen speech. And later, we need to talk about Catherine Fitz. She's been warning for years about these stories that are now playing out. And she's also warning specifically about a digital ID. And here, a digital euro in combination with what Thunderlines is planning could really lead to massive upheavals. She's even talking about a digital concentration camp. Let me give you this. I mean, I don't like the word because it's just crazy to use words like that here. But she probably used that word intentionally to wake people up. It's just absolutely crazy what's going on right now. Guys, hold on tight, check out this speech.
As technology evolves, we need to build up societal immunity around information manipulation. Because research has shown that pre-bunking is much more successful than debunking. Pre-bunking is basically the opposite of debunking. In short, prevention is preferable to cure.
Essentially, this concept is fundamentally the opposite of debunking. While debunking involves disproving false information, this approach focuses on reinforcing the truth and ensuring that misinformation does not take root in the first place. In essence, there will be consequences for your social media platforms or something like that. So, censorship is happening here right now. In the future, however, it should be the case that you can do this before anything is unloaded, or something like that. At least that's how I understand it. So, there should be a censorship checker going over posts. So, that means there could be filters put in place or other mechanisms to tackle things even before content is published here. And then you can do the whole thing with any impose penalties or something like that. Do you then impose penalties on platforms? If they then share certain content, then the whole platform gets a warning, a penalty, or something like that. And that is really, really mean, especially when we think about it. Okay, hey, who is the one who decides what is right and what is wrong information? Who decides what is misinformation or disinformation? And who decides that this isn't disinformation? I mean, disinformation is already such a concept that's really out there. Because, I mean, from my perspective, the ECB is responsible for inflation. The ECB isn't exactly there to do people any favors. The ECB is there to redistribute purchasing power. On the other hand, Bitcoin is there for the people. Bitcoin basically promotes a fairer system, that there's hard money and so on. But those are just my views. But what if now? For example, Ursula von der Leyen says, no, I see it completely differently. The ECB is the best thing in the whole world. Bitcoin is absolute trash. And then Ursula von der Leyen from the EU side simply defines the whole thing in such a way that she says, okay, Bitcoin is very bad, ECB is very good. Then any positive information here about Bitcoin will simply be tagged as disinformation. And then anyone who writes something positive about Bitcoin is not in line with the state propaganda or something like that. And that person could potentially get canceled, facing consequences for it. I mean, that's just one example. Like I said, it can also happen in a bunch of different ways. But that's the absolute danger we're heading towards. And the worst part is you can't even really stop it. Because, as I mentioned before, feel free to drop a comment about who among you voted for Ursula von der Leyen. I mean, somehow it was all sneaky with 3 votes and indirect voting methods or something. Or maybe that's how they were kind of elected, but not really directly or anything. And that's the really bad part, that the people at the very top in the EU positions have basically nothing to choose from. Elon Musk recently said in an interview that the EU is totally screwed, or that Germany is completely screwed, because in the US, at least the individual states have some say. There's no overarching organization or anything like that. But here in the EU, it's like this: the individual countries have a little bit of a say, and then there's just the overarching organization. And the superorgan has even more power than the individual states below it. And that's why it's really, really difficult to get everything back on track. That definitely says in America, it's easier to get the system back on track. And in Europe, it's a lot darker, the whole situation, especially with this massive EU over each state we have. And what we're seeing now is that it's just getting worse and worse.
Perhaps if you think of information manipulation as a virus, instead of treating an infection once it has taken hold, that is debunking. It is much better to vaccinate so that the body is inoculated. Debunking is the same approach.
So you really have to check this out. I don't think I've ever seen such a dystopian speech here. So it's just something that can't really be described with words anymore. Here, they're really using the example of a vaccination. But that makes sense. A vaccination can't just happen on a physical level. There are also really mental vaccinations. I mean, when you're always taught in school, like, hey, 2%, inflation, ECB is doing pretty well, we need a flexible money supply, and so on. That's just how it is. Types of vaccinations that are happening here. And this is just supposed to keep going, that there's even more media manipulation happening, that there's more manipulation through schools, that people who then calling out against this manipulation, people who have a different opinion are being shut down and so on. And that's just how it is here. A massive restriction of the sovereign individual. The idea here is to really create NPCs, people who just march along, and they're not making a secret out of this at all. It's being shared very publicly, very openly, transparently. They're saying, hey, we're vaccinating you, and anyone who opposes this will be canceled. Anyone who opposes this will be put in the bunkers, as far as I'm concerned. That's a bit over the top, phrased like that. But anyone who opposes this will have to face consequences. But the problem is that you're shooting yourself in the foot here. People are isolating themselves here because other countries, like the USA, are opening up. And now here in Germany, in the EU, they're really pushing back hard against that. It seems like they don't want to change things here. It seems like they want even more control, even more surveillance. And people are still going along with it. That's the biggest evil, which I just don't understand. I don't understand why people aren't standing up here, like pulling out pitchforks or something. But apparently, do people still let themselves go along with it? Because people either don't get it or people are still doing too well. So, feel free to write in the comments why people are letting this happen, and why there aren't already much bigger uprisings or anything like that.
Because disinformation relies on people passing it on to others. It is essential that people know what malign information's influence is, and what the techniques are that are behind it. And as the knowledge goes up, our chances of being influenced goes down. And that builds up the society resilience that we will need.
So, I gotta tell you, I really feel like throwing up when I hear this. So, translated, it means we're building a society here of people who are double and triple boosted and vaccinated, who we then plant some kind of mind in their heads. And then they say, okay, this is right and that is wrong. And that builds a free, open society or something like that. That strengthens the community and so on. It's actually the complete opposite when the status quo is really questioned here, when politicians are held accountable, when things like Ursula von der Leyen's speech are scrutinized. When there's open debate about these issues, that's what embodies democratic values. If there is an opposition here, if there is, there are real fights, and by fights I mean on an intellectual level, when people argue, debate, have really heated discussions, bring up things that are perhaps controversial and things like that. That's what makes a society strong. But if in the end there's only one opinion, and anyone who steps away from that opinion is labeled a Nazi, a right-wing extremist, or whatever, like some kind of alien or something, that's not a good society. That's not what we want at all. We want a society where the individual is empowered, and not where we have some kind of agenda that we want to push through really hard. But the craziest part is yet to come. Catherine Fitz, who's been doing investigative work here for years, also tackles the whole corrupt money system. She really hit the nail on the head with that one. And that, combined with what von der Leyen is planning, could really be the downfall of a free society. I mean, in my opinion, it's not going to happen because Bitcoin is going to prevail here. But definitely listen to what she has to say. Absolutely crazy what's going on here. It's already mentioned in the speech. We can see it here. It says here that central bank money wants to control you.
So let's just look at the next slide. I call this the 12 steps to total control. If you walk around your life is being digitized. Your equipment in your home is being digitized. Your car, I just rented a new car. I had to put Post-it notes all over the front. It was so digitized and flashing at me. But your transportation is being digitized. Now the BIS is running a process to create a complete inventory on all the assets in the world, digital assets, and they're going to tokenize them. We have smartphones, telecommunications, surveillance. All of these can be very invasive, and it's amazing. I spend so much time in my life with people saying, well, I can live with a smart meter. It's really not that much of a big problem. Or I can live with I like my smartphone. It's really convenient. And, why do you make such a fuss about QR codes? They're irritating, but I can live with QR codes. Here's the thing on all of those things. The problem is not each individual one. The problem is the day you implement a digital ID and you implement an all-digital monetary system, guess what? It synthesizes into one integrated system, and your home, your car, your community become a digital concentration camp.
So, this is the absolute bombshell, the ultimate shocker that she's talking about here. She's talking about a digital concentration camp. I mean, you really have to check this out. And it fits perfectly with what the EU is planning here. So, it fits perfectly into the EU's agenda. And she's posting all these things like AI, here digital assets, CBDCs, digital central bank money, here all the electronic devices. And what do I know, what else is out there? And she also says this is all cool and technology and progress, and so on. But it only works if we have an open society, if we have a censorship society here like von der Leyen prescribes where you say, okay, there's a truth ministry and this is okay, and that is not okay. Then all of this is still somewhat manageable until the day when digital central bank money is introduced and when the digital ID is rolled out, and then you're completely surveillable and totally controllable. And then you can also perfectly carry out the censorship that's already being publicly addressed, because then you can just say, okay, hey folks, we now have a digitized world, you have a car or something like that. And if you just don't align with the official opinion, then you just can't anymore. Get into your car, because your car, we can control it remotely through digital ID or whatever. I mean, this is still a far-fetched scenario, but it could happen that they just say, okay, you no longer have access to your assets to your account because we have digital central bank money. Or the next scenario, we shut down your social media channels if you say anything anti-state or something like that. Or we could shut down any other gadgets of yours. I mean, she even goes so far as to say that you could potentially turn off everything once everything is digitized. You could turn off the fridge, turn off the car, you could disable the navigation, you could keep you away from any public transport. I mean, she's definitely being very, very dystopian here. Like I said, in my opinion, it won't go that far because Bitcoin is going to win here. We are now at a turning point. On one side, there's the old system that keeps trying to fight. And then it's also clear that the whole system is turning on itself. The system is completely escalating like thunder lines. Those were the last cries like, oh man, our system is going down. But we still want to somehow save it. We just need to be even more overbearing. But that's not going to happen, folks. You don't need to worry or be afraid at all. It's going to get really, really bad again. It's going to get worse, but eventually there will be a breaking point, and at some point it will clean itself up automatically. And the truth, freedom, love always wins because love is always stronger than hate. Truth is always better than a lie. And Bitcoin will always win against fiat money. However, it can still get really, really rough in the coming years because we are currently in a transition period, in a transformative time. And transformation always means a lot of friction, a lot of struggle, a lot of heated things. And it often means crisis. And we see the outgrowths of this crisis in the form of thunderlines and so on. This crisis will usher in a new turning point, a new era in the world. Bitcoin will be a big part of this new era, this new turning point. Bitcoin is really going to find its way into the mainstream here. It's not going to be tomorrow, it's not going to be the day after tomorrow either, but it's going to be a long, long process. But Bitcoin is winning, folks. And if you want to buy Bitcoin, I'll put a link down below for you. 21 Bitcoin, how you can easily, safely, and simply buy Bitcoin. Here you can find savings plans, one-time purchases, auto wallets, transfers, limit orders, and much more. Let me know what you think about the dystopias here from Thunderlines. See you later. Peace out.